This is Gemara Pesachim and Daf Mem. Today's shir and all the learning for the Chodesh of Teves has been sponsored as a special chos ilu neshama for Leah Rasha Basar Varyaleb, as well as a chos ilu neshama for Varyaleb and Yaakov. The neshama should have an aliyah. This chos for the learning of the entire Chabura should be an ilu neshmasam, as well as a good friend of the Chabura, the close Talmud. His father should have a refuah shalema b'karov Rav Naftali Aryeh ben Cyril b'Sayishar Chali Yisrael. Of course, all the other Chalim Chaim Yichus ben Malki Demi ben Nikir men of Vigel Chaim and Social Zim Reizel Zar V'Tinandi Vasim Chaysari. You saw in the middle of the tribulation, is the no stream Chana. Follow me to read the name of Chana. Raise the bracha about Sevi Muslim Chelsea, but they flew from Simon Esther. Sayshachli Israel. Those Chosiba get Leah Bas Ita. We pick it up on the bottom of Lamid Tes Amid Beis, and of course, thank you to all those with the wonderful feedback about the 4-minute Daf review. I hope many more people enjoy and get a good clarity as we quickly review the key concepts in every Daf. And it's being sent out via WhatsApp. You can send the message as well. Says the Gemara on the bottom of Lamed Tesam and Beis, 4 lines to the bottom. Amri Dvei Rav Shila. Vitika Shari. Vitika is mutter. What's vitika? So Rashi says that it means you're mixing food together with flour. A meichel kamach, as Rashi says, and that's really going to be, if we had to give like a theme of the day, it's going to be flour. It's going to be all the different ways, just to point out, flour by itself, especially nowadays, halach l'maisa, regular flour is not chametz. Back Bisman Chazal might have been different, but that's really what we're going to discuss today, is all different things that they did to flour, if you mix it in with food, etc., etc. Starts off the day with Dvei Rav Shila, teaches us that Vatika, food that you cook with flour, shari, is mutter. Says the Gemara, Vatani, we learned to the price opposite, Vatika is aser. Answers the Gemara, Laikasha, Hada Avda b'mishcha umilcha, Hada Avda b'mayo milcha. If you mixed it with oil and salt, then it's not going to become chametz, it's going to be mutter. If you mixed it with water and salt, then it's going to become chametz with the flour when it cooks, because you have the flour with the water, and that is the case that is going to be aser. Says the Gemara, Amar Marzacha, Loi limchi idshi kidra bekimcha. One should not mix their pot with flour, which actually is a way of thickening the food. De'avishna. De'avishna, so Rashi explains, what's the avishta? The avishta is some sort of oven dried flour, a very dry flour they would put inside the food, which in order to thicken, like we know some people do with soups and things like that, to thicken up the food. Says the Gemara, why not? It might not cook well, and it's going to come to become chametz. Okay, number one we learned is that to mix the flour with water in a dish is forbidden. Number two, we're learning that you should not put this flour inside your dishes to thicken it up. It might come to chametz. Amar Rav Yosef, loy lichloit inshi. A person should not put the flour with boiling water. B'roislin, Rashi says, you should not put the flour with boiling water. Says the Gemara, what type of flour? Trei chiti b'hadi adad. You should not take 2 different types of flour and mix them together with boiling water. Why? The mazda chada. Maybe one of the wheats, one of them is going to come. V'yasva b'tzirya dechavrarta, and it's going to sit inside the ditch, the cleft of the other type of wheat. V'lo yisalik lahu. And it's not going to come out. And the bubbling water is not going to touch all arba ruchsa, all 4 sides, and therefore what? It's basically you have this wheat kernel. They're afraid that the water might sit inside of it. It might sit inside the other wheat kernel, one inside the other. Therefore, the water will not touch all 4 sides, and therefore it's going to cause it to become chametz. Okay, so 2 different types of wheat you should not be cooking in boiling water together. V'amar Abaye, 4 lines down, says Abaye, you should not cook, you should not scald 2 types of stalks of grain together. Why? Maybe the water is going to come from one of them, and it's going to get swallowed up by the other one, and it's come to chametz. Here we have stalks of grain, and similarly, we're afraid that it's going to sweat down a little bit, one's going to drip on the other one, and that's going to become chametz. Amar lei Rava. Rava says, if that's what you're concerned about, if you're concerned that the stalk is going to drip, its water is going to fall into the other one, says Rava, you should be worried about maybe within one long stalk itself, something's going to fall off and touch the other one and cause it to become chametz. Ella Amar Rava, therefore Rava argues on Abaye, says Rava, may Peiros Ninu. What was the case? The case was we're talking about Mei Peiros, you're cooking with fruit juices. Or Mei Peiros Ina Machmitzim, a rule that we've seen already, that Mei Peiros doesn't become chametz. Says the Gemara Va'adar Bei Abaye Me'ahi. And Abaye was Chayzer. Abaye retracted to call Agav Midalaya Loi Machmetzi, that anything that falls into something, as Rashi says, it's not going to cause it to become chametz. The Amar Abaye, as Abaye himself holds, this jug that's used to toast the grain, schifa shari, if it's inverted, if it's upside down, it's mutter, zikifa aser. If it's not upside down, if it's right side up, then it's going to be Aser. Again, if it's upside down, then it's going to be mutter. Why is it going to be mutter? Because all the liquid's going to fall off. Like Abaye said, all the liquids which are moving, called agav midalayu, anything that's moving, the liquids are flowing, then we're not worried. But if it sits a regular cup, like we have in front of here, if he sits a regular cup, what's going to happen? Then it's not going to be flowing, and then Abaye says, we are concerned. So again, Abaye began by teaching us you should not singe two types of grain wheats together, stalks. We're afraid the water is going to fall in. The Gemara was bothered. Why not even one? Says Abaye, the difference is going to be if it's sitting inside a receptacle that's going to catch it, that will cause the chametz. Whereas if it's sitting in an inverted kli, it's going to fall right away. Therefore, we're not worried. Rava Amar in the last narrow line, afilu zikiva nami shari. Rava holds even when it's upright, it's still mutter. What's the reason? Says Rava, mei peiros nenu mei peiros einai machmitzin. As we've seen that these fruit juices do not cause to become chametz, Rava takes that all the way, and therefore we're not worried. Okay, so that was the first discussion. Can you soak two types of wheat together? Can you soak two types of stalks together? Abaye and Rava. Abaye was chayzer. Rava says you could go all the way, even if it's a right side up, it's going to sit inside. We're not worried, because at some level that's called a fruit juice, and therefore einay machmitz, and therefore they do not become chametz. Says the Gemara Tana Rabbanan, ein loisisin se'oirin bePesach. You're not allowed to soak barley on Pesach. Ve'im laseis, and if you do that, nitbaku asurais. If the barley cracks open, then it's aser. Again, a similar concern that once it cracks open, liquid could get in, and we're worried for chametz. Loy nitbaku mutaris. That's the Tanakama. Rav Yesi, Amir comes in Rav Yesi. Sharin bechaimetz v'chaimetz saimson. Says Rav Yesi, you're allowed to soak it in vinegar. Why? Because the vinegar causes it to not become chametz. The vinegar is going to coat it, shrinks it a bit, and therefore that causes that it's not going to become chametz. Amar Shmuel ein halacha ki Rav Yesi. We do not paskin like Rav Yesi, and therefore vinegar is not necessarily going to be the savior. Amar Rav Chisda Amar Mar Ukva loy nitbaku mamish. That which we said a moment ago, that which the Brisa taught us, that if you put it in the barley and the barley cracks open, then it's an issue. Says Rav Chisda, doesn't mean it actually cracks open. Elakol she'ilu manichan al bichavis. If you were to take this barley and sit it on top of a jug, ve'ein nitbaku is me'aleim, and what would happen? Then it would cause it to crack open. That is called something that is cracked open. As Rashi points out, what does it mean it cracks open on itself? Once it's dry enough that it's going to crack open, therefore we have to be worried, even if at the moment right now it's not cracked open. So that's how Rav Yosi explains the Brisa. Ushmul Amar no, nitbaku mamish means it's to actually crack open. Avid Shmuel Ovda Bedura Devei Bar Chashi Shmuel followed his din in the following story. Nitbaku mamish, and he only said it's going to be a problem if it is fully cracked open. Now we start a new Brisa back into this theme of soaking wheat, soaking barley. What are you allowed to soak? What are you not allowed to soak? We're going to begin with three opinions in the Brisa, which, as we're going to see, is going to morph into many more opinions. As the final opinion of Rava is going to detract on numerous times. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Bal Nefesh lo yilsais, which is very interesting over here. That Rashi points out a Bal Nefesh is a chassid. We know a Bal Nefesh is a pious person. Interesting, the Rashi here points out what is a Bal Nefesh, and interesting. But anyways, says the Rabba, a Bal Nefesh, someone who's scrupulous, should not soak his wheat. Ayriya Baal Nefesh, says the Gemara. Afilu Kuli Amanami, and no one should be allowed to. Datani, we just learned in the Brisa. We just said in the first white line, you're not allowed to soak the barley. So I tell you, a Baal Nefesh doesn't soak it. No one's allowed to soak it. Says the Gemara, Baal Nefesh, Afilu Chitin the Shrira La Yilsais. Says Rabba's Chiddush is that a Baal Nefesh, even Chitin, before in the first white line over here, what do we see? We saw Sa'irin. However, says Rabba, even Chitin wheat, which is the Shriri, which which is harder, and therefore since it's harder, there's less of a concern that the liquid's going to get in. Still, a Baal Nefesh doesn't even soak that. The opinion of Rabba, Amalei Rav Nachman, man decides leila Abba, Achal Nama Difusha. Whoever listens to Abba, whoever listens to Rabba, is going to eat spoiled bread. It doesn't really mean spoiled bread over here. Rather, it means dirty bread, meaning, because when they would soak the wheat, that's what would cause the chaff, the bran, to come off. So it says Rav Nachman, if you're not going to soak your wheat, you're going to end up with bran-filled matzah, dirty matzah, which he's coining spoiled matzah. It doesn't really mean spoiled, it just means not perfectly clean. Why? Says the Gemara, says Rav Nachman, Rav Huna, let's see, the house of Rav Huna, they would soak the barley, the wheat. Rav Avin says, see, they would also soak it. So that's the opinion number 2. Rav Nachman seems to disagree entirely. Says you're always allowed to soak. For Rava Amar, this is the third opinion. The first one is Rabba, Rav Yochanan, now Rava Amar, Asar, Lil Sais. You're not allowed to soak at all. Says the Gemara, 1 second, which we learn in Lois and Sarim Pesach. What was the obvious implication? So you're not allowed to soak barley. So how does Rava learn that? Rava seems to say it's fully forbidden. Answers the Gemara, it is needless to say wheat came into this base Syria. Since wheat has this cleft, since wheat has areas that the liquid could get in, and the water could get in, therefore that's pashit that you can't soak it, says Rava. That's the chiddush, meaning it's the exact opposite of Rabbah. Rabbah taught us that the wheat is a bigger chiddush. Why? Because wheat is hard. Says Rabbah, no. Wheat is so pushy because wheat has this cleft, has this crack that the liquid can seep in. Aval barley, the shi'i, which is smooth. Ema shabir dami, I would think you could, soak it. Kamash Blunt says Rabbah, that even that you cannot soak it. Rabbah seemingly taking an extreme opinion that you could soak nothing. Says the Gemara, but Hadar Amar Rabbah retracted and he said the exact opposite. Mother Lil says you're allowed to soak it. Says the Gemara, the time going to the rice, you're allowed to be yaitzi with clean bread and with coarse bread. Says Rav, the only way to get the clean bread is if you soak it. So clearly we see from the rice, so the fact that you can be yaitzi with clean bread means you're allowed to soak it. So Rav, I'm retracting its own mother. The flour in the fine flour of Goyim, shall kfarim of the villages to hire Miztar. V'shal krachim of the cities to make. The kfarim my time. What is the reason now? Which is of the villages? It is tar la misham deloy lasasi. The reason is because it's not soaked. The kakar lay silas, and yet it's called silas. So you had a rayu. The fact that you can be yoyt with fine flour, fine clean matzah. What do you mean? We see clearly from this brisa that you could have silas, you could have fine flour even without soaking it. Says Gemara, no. Terguma kimcha. That which it said is going back only on the kemach, but not on the silas on the fine flour. Basa denafik Amar, after he went out, he said, "My time alay imalay meha." Why don't you bring a proof from here? Damar Rav Zira, Amar Rav Yirmi, Amar Shmuel. Chitin shal minachis in loisenis on the wheat of the carbon mincha. They would not soak it, but kakar lay silas, and yet it's called silas. So says the Gemara, Rava, what are you talking about? You're old raya that you let us soak it. So the fact that you can fulfill your mitzvah with clean bread, but we see you could have clean bread even without soaking it. Says the Gemara, Hadar Amar Rava. This is Chazara number 2 of Rava. The second time Rava is retracting his opinion. The third opinion of Rava says what? Mitzvah lil sais. Not only, before we said he started off with Aser. Then he said you're allowed to. Now says Rava, it's a mitzvah. You gotta soak it. Shenemar says in the Torah, Shemartem is a mitzvah, as we saw 2 days ago, meant that you have to guard the matzah. Says Rava, if you didn't need to soak it, Shimar Lamai, what are you watching it for? Meaning, the Shimar, the guarding of the matzah, sounds like it's a higher level, says Rava, than just ensuring there's no chametz inside. It sounds like what it's talking about is you're guarding for something additional. Says Rava, so you know what's going on over here? You soaked it, therefore there's a concern it might become chametz. So now, says the Torah, you have to watch it. As now Rava speaks out, Ishimar Delisha, if you tell me you watch it when you need it, Shimar Delisha Lav Shimu, that's not a real watching. Why not? The Rav Huna taught us, but the dough of a guy, Adam and Malay is krisa mehem. You're allowed to eat it on Pesach. Again, obviously the dough, which you know is not chametz, you're allowed to use it on Pesach. However, the final kazayis, the kazayis of Afikaimin, they have to make sure to eat from Jewish bread. Says the Gemara, the first breads you can't eat from the Gaish. You're allowed to eat from the Gaish breads. My time, what's the reason? The reason reason why for that Fikaimin you have to not eat the Goyish bread, even though you know for sure 100% it's not chametz, because it needs to be Shimer, you have to watch it. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. What was from the guy? You got the dough from the guy. So if the din of Shimer, the din of guarding it, is from the Lisha, from the kneading, from the dough point and onward, so guard it from the point of baking. So from the fact that we do not allow you to guard it from the point of baking, and once the dough came from the guy, we say you cannot use it for your mitzvah. That you need to have Shimer, you need to watch it all the way back from the beginning. And that is Rava's raya, that is a mitzvah to use this flour that is soaked. Seemingly not a chiyav, a mitzvah. Why, says Rava? Because then you'll have an extra shimer, an extra watching. Says Gemara, how do you know this? Dilma shayni asam dima denachis l'shimer, loy avid l'shimer. Maybe once something could potentially need watching, then and you didn't do watching, that's the issue because it came from the guy. Maybe for the moment that it requires, you did a shimer. Maybe you can't bring a proof for the case of the guy, and rather in a regular case, the shimer, the watching of the kneading would work, and you do not necessarily need to have a watching all the way back from the stage of the soaking to the stage of the flour. Says the Gemara, Rava was not chayzer a fourth time. Rava said to those who were turning over the bread, those who were tying the wheat, I should say, to making the barrels all the way by the wheat in the field. When you bind together all the wheat, as Rashi says in last Rashi, do it l'shem mitzvah all the way back from the time of the field. Alma says the Gemara, pour in line, which generally is apsak l'maisa, you need to have it watched all the way from the beginning of the process, all the way from the time of the cutting and the binding of the wheat. And that is the final opinion of Rava. So again, we had quite a progression. Rava started off that it's afser to soak it. He went to say it's mutter to soak it, and he concludes that it's a mitzvah, so that you could have this extra level of shima, this extra level of watching, all the way back from the time that it is green. Says the Gemara, Mar Breid Ravina. Mar, the son of Ravina, Minaktule Ema Ba'arbe, his mother would his mother would store the wheat inside jugs, so that all the way back the special wheat for the matzahs would be prepared and stored lishma, separate, all the way back from the time that it is wheat. Says the Gemara a bunch of stories. There was a boat, the chiti of wheat, the tava that soak in the bechishta that soak in the ocean called chishta. Shari Rava Lizvuna Lenachrim. Rava said you can't use this wheat, but whatever you salvage from the shipwreck, you could sell to Goyim. So asked Rava, if you have a beggar that you lost the kilayim, you knew that there's kilayim in there. For example, you know that there's a mixture of wool and linen, you know that there's a problem, but you can't find that thread. What's that halacha, says his Brisa? You can't sell it to guy. You can't use it to make a saddle for a donkey. You can make it for tachrichem for the mace. Says the Gemara, tachrichem the mace. Says the Gemara, lenachri my time aloi. Why are you not allowed to sell this beggar that you don't know where the claim is to a guy? La misham the other mazon Yisrael, because we're afraid he's going to come sell it to a Jew. So says the Gemara, that boat that's sunk at sea, that you just told me you let to sell it to a guy. How you let to do that? We should be afraid the guy is going to go sell that wheat to a Jew, and that wheat is a problem of chametz. Says the Gemara, Rava retracted. Zichnu kabakabal Yisrael, you should sell it one kav at a time to a Jew, that they can finish it before Pesach. It was close to Pesach, and rather than sell it to a guy, because we're afraid the guy will subsequently sell it to a Jew, causing the Jew to be over on chametz on Pesach. Says the Gemara, Tanara Abanan, Ein a moilin as a gedera be Pesach. You're not allowed to add flour to the dish on Pesach. And if you want to, first put in the flour, then the vinegar. First opinion. Similar to what we saw before, that vinegar causes the item to not become chametz. You first put in the vinegar and then the flour. So says the Gemara, who is this Yeshayimim? Man Yeshayimim. Who's the Yeshayimim that allows you to even put in the vinegar first? What's going on over here is the machlikas is putting the vinegar into the dish, destroy the chametz capabilities, the back to the chametz, only if you put it in after the flour, or even if the chametz, the vinegar is there first, it still has the power that if you were to have flour and afterwards won't allow the flour to become chametz. Says the Gemara, so who is the opinion that allows you to even add the vinegar first, meaning that the vinegar has this incredible power even when it's added to the dish prior? That weird, it's not. You take off this frying pan with boiling water, you can't put it out of its spices. Put the spices inside the dish, or inside your plate. Rav Yehuda Aimer says Rav Yehuda L'Kolu Naisein Chutz B'Davar Sheish B'Chai Mitzvahs here. Says Rav Yehuda, you're allowed to put the spices into anything aside for what? Aside for something that has chaymitz, something that has vinegar. What do we see? We see that Rav Yehuda holds that even if the vinegar is there first, the vinegar is there before everything else, it still has this incredible power, and therefore you're not allowed to subsequently add the spices. So says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda will be our opinion that Rav Yehuda is going to hold that you're not allowed to add, that you're even allowed to add the vinegar in first and then the flour in later. Says Gemara, very good. But one second, why don't we say it's Rav Yosi? That's not Rav Yosi. As we saw in Amud Aleph, Rav Yosi says if you're allowed to soak the flour in vinegar because the vinegar causes it to shrink, the vinegar causes it to not to become chametz. So why don't we say Rav Yosi is the same opinion that will allow you to put the chametz, the vinegar, into the dish first and subsequently add the flour? Answers the Gemara, no. We know that Rav Yosi went to Rav Yosi says, that's only vinegar, pure vinegar, that's when it destroys the flour, it doesn't become chametz. But once the vinegar is mixed together with a dish, Rav Yosi will not allow that. So we're seeing that the Mishnah, this Ish Aimrim, is the opinion of Rav Yehuda. Says Gemara, Ula Amar, Ula argues on everything. The Tanakama, the Ish Aimrim, Ula says you can't put in vinegar first, you can't put in vinegar second, why not? Umar Amar, Echad Zev, Echad Zev, Aser Misham, Lech Lech, Armin Niziro, we tell the Nazir, stay far away. Schar, like Armin, like Sakif, don't get even close to the vineyard. Says Ula, a special get there, we're not even allowed to get even close. Therefore Ula says you can't put the vinegar first, can't put the vinegar second, you're not allowed to mix the flour together, and we're not going to allow it to be saved by the vinegar. Rapapi Shari Le Rapapi says in Mutter Lavord the Kidaverish Kalusa. He allowed the bakers of Verish Kalusa Mimche Kidra Bechasisa to mix their pot with this flour. Amar Rava Ika de Shari Ki Milsa Bedachli Rava said, Rapapi, that's crazy. Is there anyone that's going to be making in a place with so many servants? There's so many servants over here. You're not afraid someone's going to get messed up? Rava was quite upset. There's no way he could do it. Ika Diarmi the opposite. Rava Kufay Machle Kidra Bechasisa. The exact opposite. The Rav himself held it was so mutter. He mixed it himself. Let's just begin. The Mishnah says we've been discussing the whole day today is putting flour and 2 dishes. And now we say, what are into other items? Says the Gemara, you're not allowed to put it into the charesis or to the mustard. Then Nasan, if you put it in, you have to eat it immediately. Rameir Rameir says it's forbidden. Neither with liquids nor with fruit juices. Aval, you could smear and you could dip into those liquids or the meiperis by hand with them. Meitashmishai, the water of the baker shall nachtem of the baker, the water that the baker uses to rinse his hands off as he's kneading the dough. Yishbechu, you have to pour out that water, because we're afraid that water is going to become chametz, and we'll pick up with the Gemara tomorrow.